Episode 21 of LogiCast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata. And I'm joined today, as always, I'm getting the as always back in, John, because it just trips off the tongue. I'm joined today, as always, by my colleague, John Goodall. How are you doing today, John?
Oh, I can't complain. Weather's all right. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. Lots of sun, so I'm not paying very much for my electric. Can't complain.
Good. The solar panels are generating some ROI.
Yeah, I'd be happier if my supplier had finally sorted out my export tariff because I'm exporting far more than I'm using, but I'm not getting paid for it yet.
Well, I know you're hot on those things, so I'm sure you'll have that sorted in no time. And we're also joined today by a very special guest, Abhishek Moria from India. And I was absolutely bowled over to see that Abhishek is actually wearing a Captain Cloud t-shirt because he was a former competition winner. So Abhishek, great to have you on. Great to see you representing the brand. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Abhishek.
Yeah, I'm a cloud engineer working for one of the APN partner company called Future Alice. My work is pretty much around AWS, beginning from consultancy to solution architect and some development here and there. I'm also into the training part. So whenever a new trainees joins up our organization, I help them get certified with the courses, and I also sometimes take private tuitions and tutorials for the people who connects with me on LinkedIn. So that's pretty much all about me. Thank you.
So what certifications do you currently hold? Let's have a cert off. How many have you got the gold jacket? Let's start there.
Yeah, currently I have 5 active AWS certifications, all the associate level and both the professional level, the solution architect and DevOps professional.
Fantastic. I think that makes you the most certified person on the podcast then. I think I've got 4 with one about to expire, and I've done nothing about renewing it. So my SysOps administrator is about to expire at the end of July. So I've still got time. So I might just throw in a cheeky test and see if I pass or not. But I don't want to. I don't want to soil my 100% success rate like you, John. So
yeah, I've only
far,
got 2. I've only got 2 for exactly that reason. I don't like taking them until I'm 100% confident I can pass them. Partly because, I mean, you pay for them, Carl, so it's not the money, it's just the inconvenience. Because it's a pain in the backside going up. It's like half a day just to take a 2-hour exam, so it's a pain. And B, yes, of the 3 I've taken, I've passed all 3. So,
but you've only got 2.
Yeah, I did the essay associate years ago, and it expired, and I never bothered to renew it.
And so, Abhishek, I'm just curious: are you do you do your exams at home, remote proctored, or do you prefer to go to a test center?
Uh, yeah, I did it on test centers. Although one of the SysOps beta exam that was just about to launch with the new hands-on labs, that I did at my home with the remote proctor. So I have experience of handling both, and I think I like the tech center most because it's a small, silent place and nobody to disturb, no things to arrange, and immediately you can start your exam. So I think that was the best part of going with the test center. I have done all
Yeah.
the certifications on the test center only.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I also did my SysOps at home, but it was in the height of the pandemic, so there was no choice.
Yeah.
But actually, I wasn't at home. I was in my parents' home, and their home is a bit tidier than mine, so there was less preparation to do to make my my workstation exam compliant. So. Anyway, let's move on. So, as you know, if you've listened to the podcast before, every week I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS news roundup. And then John and I select a subset of the articles from the news roundup that we want to talk about in the podcast. So we've got a number of articles this week, again, that we'd like to talk about. The first one of those is about something that we spoke about recently, actually, but there was another new announcement last week about new Snowball Edge storage optimized devices with more storage and bandwidth. So we spoke a couple of episodes ago, I think it was, about sorry, my screen just locked, so I think I'm still here. So we spoke a couple of weeks ago about Snowball Edge devices, but there was a blog post last week by Jeff Barr about some new additions to the family. So what's new, John?
Well, I don't think this is new additions to the family. I picked this for a couple of reasons. Well, I know you love snowballs because they're just cool. They're just cool from an engineering standpoint. And I like a Jeff article as well because they're usually really good. So that's kind of why I picked these. What this one is doing is this is kind of walking you through using Snowball Edge with the large data migration service, because that's kind of the point of these devices. Yes, okay, they're X number of terabytes or whatever. But people like, say, NASA, when they moved to AWS, they would have had terabytes and terabytes and terabytes, possibly petabytes of data to move to the cloud, right? So this is kind of walking you through how to do that in Jeff's inimitable style. It's really quite good. It's worth mentioning, of course, that the devices have a couple of really cool connectivity options, so you can do these really fast data transfers locally. That is required. So it's talking 10 gig base T, so that's 10 gig Ethernet networking, SFP and QSFP, which is fiber optic, which is really cool. It's really got big chunky connectors and everything. They're cool. But yeah, it's talking about the large data migration service, and they do the standard spiel for talking about ProServe and partners and all that kind of thing, which you sort of expect them to do. And then it walks you through how to do it with a large data migration plan. And this is an AWS service that kind of helps you move vast quantities of data out of your on-premises setup into AWS in the most efficient manner. So rather than ordering 10 or 20 snowballs all at the same time, it walks you through how many you want to have in your data center at any one time, because you might not have space for lots of them, because most data centers are fairly packed, because that's kind of the point. So, I'll have one or two at a time, please. And then it will come up with this kind of schedule of order of migration jobs to do. And then you get this nice dashboard through CloudWatch, and you got a job ordering schedule, and so on and so on and so on. It tells you what to order and when to do it. And then you connect it and you do all the migration, and that's kind of all fairly well trodden. But yeah, I thought this was definitely worth talking about again, because these things are really cool, for one. And for two, yes, the snowmobile, when that came out, I feel like that was a PR stunt for reInvent. The big semi-trailer with the armed guards and all the rest of it. That felt more like a stunt. This feels more real to me.
Do you have some experience with the Snowball devices, Abhishek?
No, I have just heard and read while preparing for the certifications. But what I feel the best part of Snowball devices is either you want to move your data to AWS or you want to get the AWS data to your place. The Snowball devices can help you with both the calls. Uh, and the best part with the edge devices is it provides you the RAM, so you can perform some operations over there. Although the S3 is very cheap when you store TBs of data present in the bucket, but I think with Snowball devices the cost is not too much comparing to the internet that is required to transfer this data via internet connection of maybe some Gbps, that is to transit in some really good amount of time. So I feel Snowball devices are really good. One more thing that I really love about AWS blogs is how they provide the detailed steps, how you actually want to do it. So it's not just an announcement that, hey, we are launching this device. No, it is like they are providing the steps that you go to console, click here, use this option, write this name, create this role, and all the details option that will help you create and transition and complete your task.
Yeah, it's great to have those tutorials. It's literally a step-by-step
Right.
walkthrough of how to actually create this large data migration plan. So yeah, that was a new one on me. The data migration plan, is that a new feature, or is that just something that Jeff's decided to draw our attention to? With the
I don't think it's new. It's just, a nice feature. It's very interesting, Abhishek, that you say about the cost of an equivalent internet thing. The last time we spoke about this, one of the things that I brought up, because I'm quite keen on this, was even with your ridiculously powerful and expensive internet connection, you're not going to be able to get the same kind of transfer speeds unless you live in somewhere like South Korea, where you have terabit parallel, which, it's kind of not likely. Whereas with an SFP or a QSFP local connection, you're moving gigabytes per second, which you just can't do over the internet.
Right.
So yeah,
One
it's
of the
still faster to do it like this.
Yeah, one of the things that they have introduced in this new feature is they are providing more storage and more bandwidth. So for the customer who wanted the more storage to be transferred at once, rather than ordering multiple devices or to transit that much amount of data, now that can be ordered with just one device of maximum of a capacity 210 TBs at a time. So this is a new feature that they have introduced, and I think it's really going to helpful a lot of customers who wants to migrate a large chunk of data to AWS.
I need to find a large chunk of data just so I have an excuse to order one and
Podcast hack catalog.
and play with it. Yeah, but that's already in the cloud, so I'll just have to download it just so that I can ship it to S3 using a Snowball device. So I have seen them. In fact, we're off to the AWS Summit London this week, and there'll probably be some there. They usually have them if you want to go and see one in the flesh or in the plastic, as it were.
I'd love to get one in a rage room. That would be so much fun.
And smash it up.
Or try to see how tough it actually is.
Is that a thing in India, Abhishek? Have you heard about rage rooms?
No, I haven't heard about.
No,
But I see that these Snowball Edge devices are only for the US customers, and right now the newer version with more storage and bandwidth is not available for India. It is just for 2 regions in US. So definitely they will find
that
this
is a good point.
as
That's a
they-
good point, actually. Yeah. I think maybe that's just applies to the new ones, but I think we can get them in the UK.
I don't think we could get the storage optimized 210 terabyte ones.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. It's probably a shipping costs thing, or just kind of where they put them, because they're big units.
What I feel it may not be a reason that they have not launched this in Europe is because Europe has a lot of compliance and strict regulations to follow with the data. So this could be another point why they are not launching it too soon in the US, because they want to complete the documentation and legal process in the background first before they launch.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, you could have a point there. So let me explain rage rooms to you. I'm going to come back to that. Rage rooms are an experience where you can basically pay to go into a room with a big hammer and smash stuff. So like old IT equipment or whatever it might be,
like CRT monitors and things
like that.
Yeah.
And you just go into this room and you can spend half an hour in there just breaking things. So it's a really great way to relieve stress, just smashing things up. So I think John was saying he would love to. Maybe that's what we should do. Maybe that would be a great piece of content, isn't it? Order a Snowball Edge device and take it into a rage room and smash it. But see how rugged it actually is. It might be a bit expensive, though. I think we should probably read the small print first on the Snowball Edge contract. Because I would imagine they're quite expensive to replace.
Yes. Because once they ship this to your place, I think they give you 7 days to upload the data and ship back. So breaking them will cost you definitely money.
I don't think it would take us 7 days to smash one, but they are quite rugged. So anyway, moving swiftly on from that idea, because that could be a very expensive idea. Let's go on to our next article for this week, which is why did you choose this one, John? This is a blog post by you on the Logicata blog.
Yeah, I don't like talking about my own things. I don't. I'm cutting you off there. It's AWS Lambda use cases. When should you use it? I don't like talking about my own articles because it's a bit shameless, if we're honest. But I did promote it to the community builders Slack group and got some decent feedback. So I thought it was okay. Let's talk about it. Partly this article sat in the to review pile and to write pile for just ages. This was a really hard one to write because word limit, word targets, and all the rest of it, and it just was so hard to do this one. This is literally a what is it and what do you want to use it for type thing. So we know what Lambda is generally on this podcast. We talk about it quite a lot. The TLDR is It's a function as a service. You don't worry about the servers underneath. You just say, I need this code to run in this language, and it should have this much RAM. And there's a single dial mode for RAM and CPU. So you say, I want this much RAM. That equates to X amount of virtual CPU. Brilliant. So you might not need more RAM. You might need more virtual CPU cycles, but you just kind of get both. Turn the dial, you get both. Cool. And then there's a whole bunch of use cases and some really nice stock photos to go with it, which I think you picked, Carl, about, things that you'd use it for. And it's things like gluing things together. So it's just kind of what I use Lambda a lot for, actually, is you're kind of sitting in the middle of various services or using them for APIs, which is really cool because you actually have to worry about building the API. You worry about the logic and then you hook it up to API gateway and then it's just kind of all done, which is great. And things like static websites, which is weird, but you can do it because things like Python with Django just render when it asks for it. It's not constantly there. So it's, request, send back content. It's the same kind of thing. It's just a different kind of way of thinking about it. And then some kind of more boring things that you sort of expect: backend data processing, ETL, running containers, which is kind of odd, but you can do it because it supports Docker images. I don't think it was meant as a replacement for ECS, but if you're feeling a bit fruity, you can do it. And I think the last one was chatbots and things, because again, there's a theme here. It's pretty much request, response, request, response. It's anything that you don't really want to be paying for if it's not doing anything. And all of these, with the exception of ETL, are user initiates request, get response. And on the ETL side of things, the request initiator is a timed trigger. So again, you don't want your whole system sitting there spinning its wheels doing nothing, and you charging for, and you being paid for, you being charged for it. Get my sentence out. When you could have something sitting there that isn't charging you for doing nothing. It's only charging you when you want to use it, when it needs to be used.
What are your thoughts on this one, Abhishek? Do you agree with John? Are there any other use cases potentially that you might want to throw into the mix? Or
I think one of the first is gluing up with the things, not the AWS glue as a service, but gluing up as a thing. And step function actually play a very important role when you have a multiple Lambda functions present. So let's say you want kind of a if and else architecture where you say, if this is happen, execute this Lambda function. If that happens, execute that Lambda function. In that case, Lambda plays a very important role. But I really like some of the features of the Lambda. First one is Lambda layer. So this is for when you have something that is not supported by AWS, or you want some files to be present before you start executing. That is a good one. Second is Lambda does not provide a source control directly. You need to maintain your source differently, but it does provide is the alias and the version option. So where you can create a multiple versions of the Lambda function, have a default one, and keep your code how we keep it in our source control like Git or GitHub. So that is another good functionality. But I think using this for the website can be a game changing for the cost management. Because say if I have a website hosted and I don't have any visitors coming up there, I will not be charged anything. Unless a user comes up on my website and clicks on some option, I will be only charged when he comes up and he clicks for the options. Otherwise, my website will be just idle if it is not being used by any of the user. So definitely it's a cost managing option. And the last point here is definitely it has some constraints with the number of storage, number of GPs. There's a timeout limit that they have defined, but I think they are improving it a lot because earlier it was just 5 minutes, now it is up to 15 minutes. And the storage option that they have given is pretty huge now. I think it's up to 10 GB that they provide. So you can work with, and you do not require an external drive to work with Lambda.
Well, there's a couple of things there that I just want to pick out. The website one is always fun because A Cloud Guru did that. They had, I think, zero or functionally zero AWS hosting bill for about a year and a half, I think. They had
Right.
staff costs and training costs and all the rest of it, but they didn't pay their AWS bill for a year and a half because it was all serverless. So that's brilliant. The system limits, as you say, are getting better because it used to be really quite slim, but then they brought Docker online and you can have up to 10 gigabytes of RAM configured. And up until relatively recently, you could only have 500 megabytes of temporary storage, and now you can mount EFS drives to it. So, yeah, it is improving all the time. I do like a step function, personally. I've written quite a lot of them. They're quite awkward to test, but they are very powerful. But yeah, it's definitely something that people need to be paying attention to. I want some more attention to, because serverless tech gets a lot of noise just because it's fun.
Right, right. And before we move to the next block of how you want to grant least privilege access to your private instances, I want to talk one feature of Lambda that can be used in addition to this feature, which is called Lambda in VPC. So if you don't want to make your resources public and don't want it to run on private, and you want it to close in your VPC with the subnets, your security group, all to be enforced, Lambda is a very great place to make all the things private and not show up. And you just can use the VPC interface endpoint to make the calls externally available, which is we're gonna discuss in the next block. Thank you.
Cool. And I'm glad we spoke about the glue one, because that was my favorite stock image, because that's how I imagine you working, John, with bits of paper and glue and scissors and things like that. So,
I mean, on the weekend with the kids, sure.
Cool. So on that note, let's move along to the next blog post that Abhishek alluded to. And this one is from the AWS Cloud Operations and Migrations blog, and it's entitled "How to Grant Least Privilege Access to Third Parties on Your Private EC2 Instances with AWS Systems Manager." So, Abhishek, you already started talking about this a little bit when we were talking about Lambda. Tell us a bit about your thoughts on this one. You go first this time.
Yeah. So this one is a pretty special, because when you have a fleet of EC2 instances and you want to manage all of them, System Manager plays a very important role. And I have been using System Manager from last 4 years, and I see from where it was before 4 years and now where it is present. The important features that I always use is Session Manager, because you don't need to open the external port for the SSH purpose. Second one is automation documents that are like super handy and super helpful. You can complete your task in a minute. One of the recent tasks that I did was installing a CloudWatch agent on a EC2 instance. Usually that is like bigger steps where you configure each and everything to get the job done. But with System Manager and an automation document, that just simplified my job. So that is pretty good. Talking about this block, I think this is a very important update with the System Manager, because usually we had to make things public, and now using the VPC interface endpoint, you don't need to have external APIs present. It can directly be integrated with the private link or the VPC interface endpoint, and it can just work as magic for your private resources. What about you, John? What points do you have for this?
Well, I picked this one out because this is something that we internally as Logicata do quite a lot of, because we're a managed services provider. We manage clients' EC2 estates. We have SSH access to them and all that kind of thing. And maintaining and managing that is always a challenge. It is, because clients will either just hand over the root keys, which is not amazing. They might hand over the default keys that they've created, which is okay. But then we have administrator accounts, which we're sharing with them, which again it's sort of okay, but it's not great, especially if they're logging in, then we're logging in, and then we can start kicking each other off on Windows servers and whatever. And then we have certain setups that we might apply so that we can support them better in incident remediation, that kind of thing. So it's generally it's not great. This is quite cool, because the process here is, you can kind of ignore the whole private link and all that sort of thing, because that's just a way of routing traffic without using the internet. Put that by the by. What's really cool about this is you're adding temporary access keys to an EC2. So you have your access key. It's in Session Manager. Session Manager goes, great, temporary key, go. And then you have, I think it's a couple of minutes to log in with that key. That key is never permanently attached to the server. So you do your STS assume to get access to the account. You then go, right, grant me access to this server, please. Don't touch your boom, John. And you then can log into the account. That's great, because it means that the problem that we as a company have, and that a lot of MSPs have, is it's just gone. It's just gone, because it's all configured properly remotely. And you go, bink, I need access. I now have access. Brilliant.
Correct.
So yes, Carl, I would like to start using this internally. I would.
I was just thinking about magic because Abhishek said magic, and a lot of what we do is just magic, pure magic.
Auto-magically. Great word,
Yeah.
that.
And as I discussed, AWS blogs are always the technical, where they provide detailed step with minor policies required. And I see this blog is filled with the details that you don't have to switch to any other documentation to complete the setup that they have given. So it's pretty easy. Each details and code is everything that is provided in the blog.
Nice.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. And the other thing as well is absolutely worth mentioning is it also talks about command tracking and things. So a user has done various things on the server to get access to the server and so on, and that's all logged. So some of our customers are that way inclined, and some of them aren't, because then either ISO requirements or whatever, they can then audit what we've done. What they've asked us to do is what we've done, type thing.
Nice. So I'm going to move us on because I'm conscious of time. So let's move away from the AWS blog into an article which appeared on GeekWire and lots of other places last week, because the press love a bit of scandal, although we're not exactly sure what's going on here. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think. But there was an article on GeekWire last week about Amazon confirming the abrupt departure of AWS Datacentre chief Chris Vonderhaar, who is the guy who's been responsible for managing AWS's global data center build-outs. And before I ask you for your opinions, guys, I noticed when I was reading the news this morning that there's been a couple of other quite high-level departures from AWS recently. The head of AWS India has also just resigned, and the head of AWS Ireland, which is obviously a pretty major region for them in Europe, has also gone. So curiouser and curiouser. What are your thoughts on this one, guys?
We've lost him.
We've lost Abhishek, so if you carry on.
We'll proceed. So, yeah, the first one I want to draw attention to on this is that the news came out via TikTok. And that's always fun. You don't often see that, but you're starting to now. Yeah, I don't know. It's a fun one, this, because the chap was apparently tipped to be a list of, on the potential successors for Andy Jassy after the AWS CEO, Andy Jassy, was elevated back up to Amazon proper. So that's the first thing that I want to draw, is this was this guy was not exactly unknown, right? He was a bit of a dark horse candidate, but he was kind of in kind of that sphere. And then the other thing was he's just gone. Right, head of the data center thing is huge, because when you think about it, the cloud is just a lot of data centers that someone else is managing. That's all it actually is, right? So the guy that ran it for a decade and a half, nearly, gone with no explanation. Like, what's going on? This does concern me. This does worry me. I mean, yes, he's not the only guy that's in charge, and they've got thousands of data centers, but the chap heading that entire division, gone. That's worrying. That is.
And the head of India and the head of Ireland. So what's going on?
Some sort of top level headhunt, I think.
What are your thoughts on this one, Abhishek?
I think when a higher authority of the person is gone and you have some plans in between, definitely things will gonna screw up in their backend. In India, actually, they are planning to create two new regions in Bangalore and Hyderabad places. So definitely, I feel the things will be delayed if the position has not been taken over in charge immediately. But I just saw that TikTok video which was attached as a reference to this material, and that is quite not so good, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, as John said, news breaking on TikTok. Perhaps we are going to have to get a Logicata TikTok account. But I'm too old for TikTok. It's not something I've got into. But maybe we will go into the deep dark world of TikTok. Anyway, conscious of time, let's just skip on to a couple of minutes on our last article. Which is a press release that went out on Business Wire last week about Elastic signing a 3-year strategic collaboration agreement with AWS to accelerate global cloud adoption. Now, obviously, Elastic and AWS been in the press a lot over the last 4 years, what with AWS forking the Elasticsearch into their own OpenSearch offering. So this to me seemed very much like a kind of kiss and makeup type article between those two huge cloud giants. But what are your thoughts on this one, guys?
I mean, same. That's the only reason I picked this, was because you don't think of Elastic being friendly with AWS anymore. Because there was this enormous, I mean, their whole OpenSearch thing was just a farce. And I don't really blame AWS for this. AWS was doing what AWS does. They were running open source things for other people, charging for it. And Elastic went, we're not making enough money because their managed offering wasn't being used because of managed Elasticsearch. So I don't know if this is a kiss and make up, or Elastic's management has gone through a change, or you know, they've woke up and smelt the coffee and worked out that they actually can't do without AWS because it's such a big player in the cloud space and people aren't using Elastic's own offerings.
Yeah. What I think here is Elastic might be using AWS infrastructure for managing this space, although I did not found any details regarding this. But I think this partnership will definitely help improve Elastic as well as the Elastic features that are given to AWS in form of Elasticsearch, this service that is being controlled and managed together.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, both organizations are huge. Elastic has a huge amount of momentum in the market, so definitely makes sense for them to be friendly with AWS because of AWS's influence and reach. But on that note, sadly, we are out of time. So we've reached the end of LogiCast Season 2, Episode 21. So thank you, John, for your input as always. And thank you, Abhishek, for joining us today. It's been great to hear your insights as well, and absolutely fantastic to see you sporting that Captain Cloud T-shirt on the other side of the world. So if you're watching, you'll be able to see that. If you're listening, sadly you won't. You'll just have to take my word for it. But that was LogiCast Season 2, Episode 21. Find us on all major podcast distributions. We're hosted on Podbean, but we distribute via iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, etc., etc. So wherever you choose to get your podcasts, you will find us. Oh, and we're also now live
We're on YouTube now.
Actually, we're not live on YouTube. We have a channel on YouTube where we will be distributing our recordings. So if YouTube is your preferred way to consume content, you will also find us on YouTube. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll be back with another episode of LogiCast next week. See you again next time.
Thank you.